you've never had hookworm or guinea worm that we could
No.
discuss?
I did get, I got the puppy Parasite a couple of years ago.
Ugh.
Yeah, well, but the puppy was so cute.
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and as always, I'm here with...
I'm Kim Blomp. I do bioarchaeology, human health and disease, and human evolution.
And I'm Ross Barnett, who studies Pleistocene megafauna and cats of the Ice Age.
And today we're taking a look at the Croods from 2013. As always, we'll start with a summary of the movie. Who wants to do that this time?
Me?
Ross is pointing at Kim.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I always do the overviews and then I kind of get halfway through and then forget everything and then just sort of bumble towards the end.
No, you always do a good job.
I like how Ross was pointing at the camera and I interpreted that as pointing at Kim, but it could have been either of us.
I was actually pointing at Kim.
Okay, so the Croods is a story about a family of cavemen, is what they call themselves. It's set in what I think is supposed to be Earth, or it's a different planet, but it's set during a different time, so it's actually a fake time in the Pliocene, and it's called the Cretaceous period. I saw that on Wikipedia. So
interesting.
They kind of get around a lot of the issues that they could have had by just making it completely fictional. Anyway, so there's this family of cavemen with the dad, a mom, a teenage daughter, a teenage son, a baby, toddler, and a grandma. And they've out-survived all of their neighbors. All of their neighbors have died from various things like common cold, getting stomped on by a mammoth. I think somebody was eaten by something. And so they're the ones that survive. And the way that they survive is that their dad is super paranoid and overcautious. And darkness means death, so they have to be in the cave huddled up before darkness comes. Anything new means death, so they can't ever try or do anything new. And he's very much stuck in his own ways and just trying to keep his family alive in this horrible landscape. And the teenage girl is rebelling against that. She doesn't want to sleep in the cave all the time. She wants to go explore. She wants to try new things. And she runs into another human who is a young man who she quite fancies. And he has all these new ideas and tries new things. And so he's been living out on his own, exploring and going places because he's able to leave the cave at night and try new things. So she wants to live like him through a bunch of chaotic disasters. Their cave gets wrecked, so then they have to leave. So then they have to follow this guy. And he takes them on this adventure into these new lands with these new animals. And the dad has to cope with trying new things and being out at night and starting to see that his family is capable of surviving lots of stuff and that they can do a lot of stuff and that new doesn't mean death and darkness doesn't mean death. And the idea is that he thinks that he never has ideas. He's not capable of new ideas, whereas this new guy always has new ideas. And so there's a bit of a rivalry between the young man and the dad for, the patriarchal role of whatever. And then, eventually the guy earns the dad's trust. He comes around. They have to survive a bunch of crazy stuff happening. And then they do, and they get to this land that's quite nice and has everything they need to survive. And they make friends with the animals that they thought were their enemies. And it's all a lovely story. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that was all the salient points.
Did we mention this is an animated film from DreamWorks?
Right, it's animated,
got to make sure
yes.
we remember to
Yes.
point out when our movies are animated or live action. This has a pretty big cast. It has Nicolas Cage plays the father, Emma Stone plays the daughter, Catherine Keener is the mother, and then Ryan Reynolds is the
guy.
The stranger boy, the guy. The guy named Guy.
Yeah.
I actually don't like it when famous people do voices on movies because all I could hear the whole time was Ryan Reynolds. He's got such a distinct voice.
Yeah.
And then also it takes away from jobs of people who do specialized voice work.
Yeah.
Right? Ryan Reynolds does not need this role.
No. But neither does Nick Cage or Emma Stone, really.
No. I think it should be different. Because then the voice is never, the dad's name is Grud or whatever. It's never Grud. It's always Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just get John DiMaggio and
That's right.
Billy West to do everything.
Well, John DiMaggio is going to have plenty of free time now that this Futurama reboot is starting without him. Outrageous.
Oh.
You not heard this?
No.
So Hulu are bringing back Futurama with the original voice cast, but they've not signed up John DiMaggio. So whatever it is, it's not really going to be Futurama without the voice of Bender bending Rodriguez. So yeah, it's highly controversial.
Are they going to have Bender with a different voice, or are they not going to have Bender?
I don't know how they're going to get around it. Yeah, it's not like they can even get Flexo to come in, because that's also John DiMaggio. But yeah, Futurama has come back from the dead more times than Dracula, essentially.
Well, back to the Croods, the Stone Age movie we're supposed to be talking about. Normally, after the summary, we start off by nitpicking all the scientific inaccuracies. This is another tricky one.
Yeah.
Ross, you want to talk about animals in this one?
Yeah, I didn't like this. I mean, I didn't like the film, and I was really shocked by how high an IMDb rating it got, because I didn't find it very fun. And unlike a film like Ice Age, which at least has some kind of tenuous link to reality in the setting and the animals there, these were all like, it was just ridiculous. They had like flying turtles. They had what was clearly an owl bear, which, if you know your kind of Dungeons and Dragons, that's a kind of classic fantasy creature. It had kind of piranha flamingos. It had a kind of saber-toothed cat with like an enormous head and too many teeth. It had mammoths, which didn't look like mammoths, and weird pig things. So yeah, it really annoyed me that it was trying to have its cake and eat it. Like, what was wrong with just having like
cool
an
animals.
actual mammoth or an actual saber-tooth, or all these incredible real animals that actually existed, which would have maybe grounded the story a bit better and made me like it a bit more, because I really didn't.
When I was young, and I don't think I'm alone in this, when I was young, I used to draw all these made-up animals that I would imagine, and it would be a mix of animals, like an elephant and a tiger together and all that. And that's what this reminded me of. It's almost like an animator was like, yes, this is what I'm going to do, is I'm going to make all my childhood fictional animals come to life. But
Yeah.
I think it was also just a way of getting around the inaccuracies, because, yeah.
I mean, there was nothing to stop. They could have set it in a kind of real time period and just had the family as they were, just be slightly paranoid. I mean, there was no reason why they had to invent all these stupid animals that they did, like enormous flying turtles with wings. I mean, come on. You could have had Teratorns.
Yeah.
All of the animals are basically some kind of chimera. They all, most of them mix two things together. And I agree that I would rather see real animals. But whenever they introduced a new animal, it was almost always like a fake out. Like, you see one thing and you think it's going to be this animal, and then a whole second animal quality comes into play and it surprises you a little bit. I kind of found that a little bit fun. But yeah, I agree. It always bothers me to look at animals that are biologically impossible.
Yeah. I think the worst example...
But it had me...
One of the worst examples...
Well, it had...
Sorry, I'm just so outraged that I keep talking over everyone. But the ones that probably annoyed me the most were the land whales, which were basically like whales with legs. And they still had enormous tails with huge flukes. I mean, what the hell?
Yeah, I know.
What is... the kind of evolutionary biologist in me was just raging. And I'm still not over it.
The whales are an interesting one to talk about, because I was just talking about whale phylogeny with a friend yesterday.
As you do.
Yeah.
As you do. Whales are an interesting case because, of course, all land animals evolved from an aquatic fish animal earlier, but then whales evolved back to be aquatic. And the closest relative of whales is like ungulates, right? They evolved from a type of almost something in the family of cows and in pigs, right? The even-toed ungulates.
I think so. Yeah,
is that correct?
Yes. Well, I think that the kind of closest land form to the cetaceans is the hippo, I think. On that branch of the kind of artiodactyls, the even-toed ungulates.
But explain why you wouldn't expect a land whale to have short, stubby legs, but also a whale tail, Ross.
Well, Where it start? I mean, obviously tails are useful in the water because that's how they propel themselves. You don't have, I can't think of any animal that has, flukes on their tail because that's not the purpose of tails on land. Tails are kind of counterbalances on land. They're not propulsive devices on land. I mean, maybe you could get around that. There are examples from prehistory of animals that flew that had kind of flukes on their tails. I'm thinking of some pterosaurs had that like Rhamphorhynchus, things like that. But yeah, I mean, the land whales, obviously, they're the exact same shape as whales, and whales can be the shape they are because they're supported by water. Whereas if you take a whale onto land, it just collapses under the pressure of air. It's not supported by the buoyancy in the water. So yeah, I mean, I'm possibly overthinking this slightly, but it just really annoyed me.
Yeah, I remember watching this movie. I watched it when it came out, and I was really excited about it. And then I was disappointed, and then have never thought about it again. And then I watched it last
Lucky you.
night, and I was kind of disappointed again. I think what it is it's just a kids movie. You know how like Ice Age and Shrek and all that, they're kids movies, but they have stuff for adults in it. This one just didn't really have anything for adults in it. So we're not amazed by the colors and the motion, so it doesn't really get us.
I think some of the jokes were meant to be kind of for adults. So the one I'm thinking of, the one that almost made me laugh, was the kind of antagonistic relationship between Grug and his mother-in-law, who's portrayed fairly unsympathetically, and he's always hoping that she's going to die quite soon. I mean, that's a kind of mother-in-law jokes are one of the oldest joke forms in existence, I think.
Yeah, that's
true.
But
it just wasn't particularly funny. I think you'd have to be a kid to enjoy this film. No offense.
What I got with the what annoyed me is I didn't mind the animals as much, although I think it would be cooler to have the real animals are so cool. I don't know why you have to make them different. But the humans, so I didn't quite understand where they're going. So they called themselves cavemen, but they had limb ratios similar to a great ape, so the long arms and the shorter hind limbs. And so that gave them a sort of a knuckle walking, like arm dragging type of look. And they didn't do it all the time, but it kind of was leaning towards that. So they weren't modern humans, but then they also weren't Neanderthals because of that. So they said they had the sloping forehead, which could be Neanderthals, but that body proportion, Neanderthals are shorter and more broad and stout than we are, but they still walk like humans and use their arms like we do. So I wasn't sure exactly where they were getting at.
Yeah, I mean, also you have to remember that the mother-in-law still has a tail as well. So
yes. Well, I thought that was just her outfit. That's just her outfit.
Yeah, does she actually have a tail, or is that just the alligator skin she's wearing?
I think that's just alligator skin.
They kind of referred to it, I think, in the film. So
Guy said that she had a tail or something like that. But I thought it was just her. I was being gracious and just saying that was her suit.
Yeah, I thought
but it's definitely played up as if she's more primitive, and that's why she has the tail suit.
It reminded me of that kind of fairly famous, well, maybe not that famous in the wider world, but in the kind of paleo departments of academia, the one of the cave person bringing their family tree to school for show and tell, and it's got this like typical cave person. It's got great grandma Bob and great grandma Wilma, and they're like single cell amoebas. And then you've got great grandparents are like dinosaurs, and the grandparents are like apes. And then you've got parents are Neanderthals, and then it's got him and his sister. That kind of mangled understanding of how evolution works.
Yeah, it could be that. I thought it was just a fashion statement, but yeah, it could be that. And then when the guy came, I forget what his name is, the one, Ryan Reynolds.
Guy.
He's just
called Guy.
Oh, is this just... and I forgot that. Okay. I'm really bad with names, obviously.
I appreciate it's complicated, but yeah, the guy's called Guy.
When Guy comes, he is more of a modern human-looking guy. Right, so he has the forehead, and he doesn't have the same limb ratio.
Personal jewelry as well. So he's got material culture. He's got fire,
and a 6-pack, and painting, skin painting. Yeah, so I kind of got it was the whole let's be discriminatory against Neanderthals idea again, where modern humans have ideas and new ideas, and that's why they're always adapting, and the Neanderthals are stuck in the past and they're not even capable of new ideas. Like Grud has to work so hard just to have a new idea. So it was kind of that old trope again.
It's also the standard losing your territory long journey film, which we've seen so many times, particularly over the last kind of few episodes. And it just really annoyed me that I sort of spent an hour and a half watching it, didn't laugh once, didn't like it. The animals annoyed me. I found very few kind of redeeming features.
I can just picture Ross sitting at somewhere in Inverness, grumpily watching the Croods at night.
Yep, sitting right in this chair right here, just going.
Did you have a cup of tea?
I did not. No.
No. Did your girls watch it?
They've seen it before, but I think I fell asleep when they were watching it, so it completely passed me by. Thank God.
Did you like it, Josh?
At first, I started off kind of liking it for a few reasons, and then about halfway through, I was also starting to fall asleep. So I felt like I was optimistic based on a little bit of the stuff they introduced, and then didn't develop it in the way I was kind of hoping they would. So, but I laughed at a few jokes. There were. Did you guys notice that this story was written by John Cleese?
No. Oh, it should have been way funnier then.
Yeah. So it was written by John Cleese for Aardman Animation. It was going to be stop motion originally, and I think maybe that would have been pretty amazing if they'd done that. Not that the animation looks really great in this movie. It's really fluid, I think. But if it had been more like Early Man, the one we reviewed last month or so, I think it might have been a very different movie, written by John Cleese and done by Aardman Animation.
If it had that kind of Aardman sensibility, I think that would have definitely improved it. I mean, Early Man, I thought wasn't great, but with the saving grace was just the sort of small background jokes that Aardman always put in there.
There were a few jokes that I thought were pretty funny. I thought that there were some good jokes. There's one where Guy is explaining what a pet is, and the grandma asks what a pet is, and he describes it as an animal that you don't eat. And she says, "That's we call those children."
Yeah, I mean, I
Ross is not laughing.
As a parent, as a parent of two children, I mean, that's not a joke. That's the truth.
Do we want to nitpick some other things? My notes for this podcast, for this episode, are the most unintelligible notes I've ever taken. It's just like feels like random words. I have like owl-faced cat, gourd lemurs, flock of whale-eating death birds, giant corn popcorn rocket fireworks.
Yeah. I mean, we could spend the whole time just nitpicking over the animals. I mean, we haven't even touched on like the push me pull you kind of ring-tailed lemur, like two ring-tailed lemurs joined by a tail as a single animal, which they end up getting used as a scarf at some point, which was mildly amusing.
I think it would be fun to do this because I like the idea of exploring the biological possibilities and determining why these animals can't happen, or if they could, like how they would look if they could happen. So yeah, there's these two like lemurs or something that share a tail, and like they're using it to like clothesline people and stuff like that. What is the possibility of having two animals converge, but only at the tip of the tail? Because you can have like two-headed developmental problems, or you can have like conjoined twins. Absolutely. Do you think there's a possibility where you can be conjoined by only the tip of a tail? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, like the original Siamese twins, Chang and Eng Bunker, they were joined just by a flap of skin at the sternum. So, I mean, if the surgery had been available at the time in the early 19th century, then it would have been fairly simple to separate them. So, you get conjoined from any particular part of the body, and so there's no reason why they couldn't have been joined at the tail. But these are not. It's not like some cases of conjoining where you share one mind and have two kind of joined bodies, or you share one body and have two different personalities. But this is like two animals that are joined just by a bit of tail. I mean, in the wild, these two animals would have gone and opposite directions at some point, and it would have just snapped because their kind of muscle force is going to be much, much stronger than the kind of bit of tail that's joining them together.
But we're assuming that they are a rare, like, congenital issue in a species. That could be the species, and they're all like that. And so they're like,
which would be even more unlikely. I mean, there would be no
Yeah.
that I can think of. And again, you don't want to preempt evolution, but I can't think of an instance where that would give a selective advantage. Whereas I can think of hundreds of selective disadvantages that this would have.
They seem to have an advantage in the movie. They were constantly using that tail to their
causing
advantage,
trouble.
right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I enjoyed how at the end, so the people, the Croods, were being chased by the saber-toothed cat thing, the parrot cat, and the owl owl bear. I thought it was still a cat. I thought it was an owl cat. Which, if you were to put two predators together into one, an owl cat would be terrifying. A giant owl cat. But and then once it became that the volcano or whatever was erupting, and it became everybody dying, everybody got together and they all saved each other, and then they all became friends. That was nice.
The power of friendship, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think one of my favorite parts, it was terrible, but you know that it's going to end up okay because it's a cartoon. When the boy, he gets this new pet named Douglas, and it's like this alligator dog puppy thing. So it looks like a little puppy, but it has a huge mouth with a little bit of hair on it. And he tells it to roll over, he's teaching it to roll over, and so he rolls over, and then he's on a cliff, and he's just gone. He doesn't show up again until the end. I thought that was funny. Ross did not.
I did not find that funny.
No.
But maybe I wasn't in the right frame of mood for
I think you were
watching this
super
film.
grumpy.
When we were emailing about what movie to do next, I got the distinct impression that neither of you liked this movie or wanted to have anything to do with it. So I kind of knew what we were expecting here.
Well, I think the first time I watched it was on a plane, so I was willing to give it another chance. Because it's never the best filming.
God, imagine if that had been the last
plane.
thing you'd ever seen before, like, your plane crash. How annoyed would you be?
There's worse movies. We've watched worse movies.
Yeah, for sure. But, I think with all the star power it had, these are like A-list names, like Nick Cage, Emma Stone,
they spent a
Ryan
ton
Reynolds.
of money on it.
Yeah, and John Cleese, he should have done much better than this.
Yeah.
So, sorry, nitpicks. All the animals, terrible.
Yep.
Land whales.
Let's go through the animals. I think it's fun.
Okay.
We'll just point out exactly why all the animals are wrong. There's a giant bird, like we've seen in other movies as well, but this bird has like goat horns.
Ram horns, yeah.
I mean, that was probably one of the more realistic ones. I mean, you think about kind of the ratites, the kind of ostrich family. You have cassowaries, which actually do have horns, or a casque is what it's technically known as. So that's at least biologically plausible. So I'd give that one a pass. Though, I mean, the amount of work these guys do just to get one egg, which they all get a
that's
sip
what I
of,
thought too.
the kind of economics of their hunting strategies are just way, way off.
Yeah. But there wasn't really much food around. They would have been better off killing the bird.
Yeah. But then they would have had no eggs.
But they didn't have control of fire.
Yes. Oh, that was a big part. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. That was a huge part of the movie, is that guy knew how to control fire and taught them how to control fire. And then that gave them the ability to scare away predators and to keep warm. And then they weren't afraid to sleep outside anymore because they had the fire. That was a huge plot line that I forgot.
So they don't say it explicitly, but are we all in agreement that the Croods are Neanderthals and Guy is a modern human?
I think that's what they were getting at, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my nitpick would be that Neanderthals had control of fire, for sure.
Yeah.
And Neanderthals ate a lot of meat. They were a diverse species, and some of them ate more meat than others, but in general, they hunted and ate meat. So it's pretty crazy to think of Neanderthals not having control of fire and not hunting animals. It's for me. That's one of my nitpicks.
And they're not shown with any tools, are they, either? I don't think, the Croods.
No.
I mean, Guy has tools, but they don't.
They're shown as being just completely useless and that they've survived up to this point just because of the dad's paranoia, right? Like, it doesn't bode well for Neanderthals.
They do have advanced art. They have,
the cave paintings.
Cave painting, realistic cave painting, which, is only recently been shown, I guess, that Neanderthals were able to do kind of symbolic art.
Yeah, almost all the cave paintings, the Stone Age cave paintings in Europe were made by modern humans. And like, really, it's only been the last 10 years where we've discovered for sure that Neanderthals did any kind of art. But yeah, for the most part, there's very few like cave paintings that could be even remotely attributed to Neanderthals. Most of the art that we're aware of right now has to do with like feathers and claws and things like that. And like one or two paintings that are pretty securely attributed to Neanderthals at this point, but they're
geometric, aren't they? They're not figurative. They're kind of abstract lines and stuff.
There's the one that is on a stalactite that is supposed to be seals, but all the pictures are zoomed out so far it kind of looks like a DNA strand. It's like two oblong ovals, one after another. So it's not like the Lascaux, like really beautiful, realistic looking animals that the modern humans would make like 20,000 years later. But they say that they're supposed to be seals, so they're trying to draw an animal.
Well, other animals, probably the most realistic animal is the one that Guy has as his belt, which seems to be a kind of three-toed sloth, who's actually one of the better characters. I think in the film he's quite sympathetic.
They had a pretty realistic snake too, and Grud tried to have a belt.
Oh yeah.
Because it's not hard to design a snake.
The most egregious animal they have is for sure is the flying turtles, because they don't work biologically, physically, probably even chemically. They're just totally impossible. You can't have flying turtles in any kind of reality in this universe.
Okay, let's talk about this one, because wings have evolved at least 4 times convergently by my count. So why couldn't a turtle evolve feathered wings and fly?
Well, obviously feathers are unique to birds for so it wouldn't
and dinosaurs,
which are birds are dinosaurs.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're just too big. You can't. There's a very well understood kind of relationship between wing size and body weight, and you can't have what look to be, kind of leatherback turtle-sized animals, talking a ton or two in weight, with I think they have 4 wings. That just
instead of legs, each of their legs has evolved into a wing.
I mean, there are examples of 4-winged animals. There's a really weird, famous dinosaur, which I can't. Is it Microraptor? I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it has preserved feathers on all 4 of its limbs, on both its arms and its legs, and it probably flew kind of like a biplane or something. But it's the size of a crow kind of thing. Even the biggest birds ever were not all that much bigger than California condors and Andean condors that you have around today. The biggest pterosaurs from the age of the dinosaurs were the size of a small plane. But yeah, these things were incredibly light. They would have weighed under, I guess, 50 or 100 kilos, something like that.
The shape of a turtle is not very aerodynamic either.
No, certainly not.
Maybe a lot of resistance.
Well, aquatic turtles must be at least somewhat hydrodynamic, right? It's pretty much the same thing.
Streamlined, but water and air are not the same.
No.
Let's talk about this main big cat antagonist, because it is sort of blue and green colored. And so I think something we could talk about is why we don't see blue and green mammals almost at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, blue is a very difficult pigment to produce naturally. So if you think of naturally blue animals, there's not very many. Blue-footed boobies, there are probably one.
Blue jays.
Blue jay, yeah. And I think my understanding is that all these kind of natural animal blues are not pigments; they're kind of diffraction pattern produced. So it's not like for instance, melanin, the kind of sort of skin pigmentation where the actual molecule absorbs some wavelengths of light and reflects other ones. With the diffraction, it's actually the light itself is reflected completely, but at an angle that produces the right wavelength or something. I never did physics, so this is all kind of making it up as I go along. But that's my understanding, is that blue is so difficult because the kind of conditions to produce it require very fine scale gradations in the actual physical properties of what's producing it, that it's really rare in the natural world. Green, I think, is probably slightly more common. I mean, you have chlorophyll for a good example. You can use that as a kind of starting green molecule. But yeah.
Also, if you think about reasons for blue, the animals that are blue, like fish and birds, are typically animals that have, like fish are in the water, so blue might be more useful for them. But for birds, it's typically a display, like a sexual display, to have the colors.
Absolutely, yeah, it's conspicuous.
Yes, so but for animals that don't have that type of evolutionary selection for their mate, so they don't need to be a peacock with beautiful colors or anything like that, then it's going to be better for them to be more camouflaged, and there's not that much blue out there.
Absolutely, and definitely for a predator,
Yeah.
there's a very, very strong kind of negative cost associated with
Yeah.
being bright and obvious. That's why most predators are kind of plain colored or camouflaged in some form,
Yeah.
because they have to sneak up on animals, and it's hard to do that if you're, bright blue.
Yep.
You can't really blend in with much.
The parrot cat and the Croods did it because the leaves, remember when it snuck up behind them, and there was all the animals, all the monkeys, they're playing with the monkeys, and then the monkeys saw something behind them and they all ran away, and they couldn't figure out what it was, and it was because the giant cat had appeared, but you couldn't see its face really because it looked like the same as all the leaves, the blue and green leaves.
Yeah.
So in that environment, it was camouflaged.
Yeah.
But that's not Earth, so yeah, it would be very, even to make that, there would be no reason for that pigmentation to occur unless you're using it for something. It offered you an advantage. And in most animals, it would be a disadvantage.
But in this case, it was camouflaged to hide in with the leaves in the jungle. So, I mean, at least in that case, it makes sense. Except that it really felt like the plants were evolved to match the tiger, the cat, because it seemed like you could just see these cat faces in amongst the plants, and then one of them was the actual cat. So I'm not sure about the directionality of the mimicry in that one.
Yeah, maybe to look like a predator means that you get eaten less because they come up to you less. I don't know.
But yeah, regarding the color, there's no animals with fur. There's no mammals that have blue or green fur. It doesn't exist because the only kinds of pigment that mammals have are either black or dark brown or like a red to yellow color. And so all of the colors that you can get out of animal fur are some shade between black, brown, red, yellow. And so in any case where you have blue or green in a mammal, it's always that light scattering or diffraction effect. It's never a pigment, so it's extremely rare. There are some blue mammals, even closely related ones to humans, because mandrills have blue noses.
Of course, yeah.
And so again, it's not a pigment in their nose, but it's somehow, again, I don't know what the physics is. I can't explain the physics very well either, but it's not reflecting blue light, but it is refracting light in such a way that the light is being scattered and the blue is what we see.
And is that related to sexual selection?
Yeah.
Mandrills,
yeah, in this case,
Yeah.
just like you said, blue is always used as a communication because it's so rare, so it's usually trying to communicate something important. So for mandrills, that's exactly what it would be. And then there are green mammals that aren't really green, but sloths usually appear to be green, but it's not actually the sloth themselves, but it's that they grow algae in their fur, and the algae has chlorophyll, so the algae is green, and it makes them look green, which I assume is an adaptation because it would make them camouflaged. Do you know if that's the reason why they have algae that grows in their fur, or is it just because they're lazy and the algae
think it's
can
that
take up?
They move so slowly and they don't move for long periods of time that it's capable of doing that.
Yeah, it's probably both together.
Yeah, and then I guess the less you move as a sloth, the more energy you conserve. Plus, then the more algae grows on you, the more hidden you are, more likely you are to survive and pass on your genes. So that makes sense. Oh, to be a sloth.
Here's a scene that I was thinking about. My microphone's falling.
Oh, I thought you were going to show us it. I was like, oh, this is getting fancy.
So there's at some point where they have to walk across coral I guess that like from the earthquake, maybe like the ocean floor lifted up and they had to cross it. I was trying to figure out, or if they were just having some magical coral forest that they had to walk across.
Well, there were seashells and stuff around there too, and starfish.
So I guess that overnight there was an earthquake and the seafloor lifted up and they walked out onto this spiky coral and their feet hurt and Guy was able to escape because he had shoes on. And then I guess he was trying to run away, but then I guess they were happy with him, so they stopped trying to kill him or whatever the deal was. And then they weren't trying to kill him. But Guy offered to create shoes for them so that they could all walk across it. And I was thinking that there is evidence that Neanderthals wore at least foot wraps in some contexts. And so I started looking it up, and actually there's quite a few Neanderthal footprints, and most of the time they're barefoot. But there is at least one set of footprints from Theopetra Cave in Greece, where I think there's 4 footprints, and they're from 2 different people, and they're both from children, and one of them is wearing some kind of foot wraps, and the other one isn't. And that's as much research as I was able to do this morning before we started recording here. So I don't know if there was another Neanderthal foot wrap footprint track that I was thinking of.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. There's some other things that they were trying to figure out from Neanderthal feet bones to determine if they wore shoes, and I had no idea there was so much detail going into defining what a shoe is, because apparently a leather foot wrap doesn't count as a shoe, but if you have more of a firm sole, that counts as a shoe. But if you habitually wear firm-soled shoes, it changes your foot morphology because you grow up, like we probably all know this, because probably none of us can walk out on the gravel with our bare feet for too long, right?
At all.
Yeah. So apparently, from wearing shoes habitually throughout your life, it changes your foot bones. They end up being less robust or something like that. And they've studied Neanderthal foot bones and determined that based on the shape of them, they probably weren't wearing firm-soled shoes. And a lot of the tracks that we have from Neanderthals are barefooted, so it seems like a lot of the time they were going barefoot. One of the things I was thinking about is that if they're leaving footprints, it's probably not winter because the ground would be frozen. So I wonder, they would have to be wearing some sort of leather foot wraps in the winter if it was the Ice Age and it was snowy, right? Even Neanderthals.
Mm-hmm. You'd think,
but, you heard it here first. Neanderthals had no souls. That's... But
well, that's going to get taken out of context.
Not wearing shoes in summer is like that's standard until very recently. People in the Highlands of my grandfather's generation only wore boots or shoes in the winter and couldn't wait until springtime to get rid of them and go back to being barefooted. So even in the north of Scotland, which is not the warmest of places, shoes were a kind of a winter thing and not a summer thing.
It's also a very Western thing because I'm sure half of the people on Earth wouldn't wear shoes in their daily life if the weather is warm enough, right? Even today.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's why you have things like hookworms and guinea worms and other kind of parasites which get into you through the food.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to a podcast the other day talking about how going barefoot in Appalachia in the United States and getting hookworm was probably the source of the stereotype that hillbillies were stupid, because probably generations of people living in the hills just had hookworm.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think hookworm, if I remember correctly, hookworm is one of our heirloom parasites too, so it's been with us for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, co-evolved with it.
And I think, talking of kind of food parasites, the guinea worm, which I think is Dracunculus, is I think the proper name for it, is now on the verge of being the sort of second pathogen to be driven to extinction after smallpox. There's like only a very, very few cases being reported. And I think a lot of this is due to a real push by the Jimmy Carter Foundation or something, that they put a lot of money into education and treatment for people who suffer from guinea worms. And I mean, it's a really really interesting parasite. I mean, parasites often are pretty cool, but the guinea worm, gets inside you. It kind of grows. It migrates down to your ankle. Then it forms like an ulcer in your ankle, which then it's itchy, makes you want to go and dip it in water so that it will kind of soothe it. Put it in water, the ulcer bursts, and out come like thousands of baby guinea worms to
Oh my God, I'd
start the
just
next
faint.
generation. But what's really cool is that I think I'm right in thinking this that one of the traditional treatments for it is that when it starts to migrate down to your ankle and kind of exposes itself through the flesh, is that you can wrap it around a small stick. It's a very fragile worm, and if you try and pull it too much, it will sort of split, and then you'll have a rotting worm inside your leg, which is not ideal. So you have to be very careful, like wind it, like one wind a day or something like that, to kind of get it out without causing any damage. But this is where people have said this might be the inspiration for the caduceus, the kind of serpent around a stick that is the sort of symbol of medicine, that it comes from winding out this guinea worm around a small stick.
That's disgusting, Ross. But parasites are fascinating.
Parasites are
it's
cool.
Actually, there's in evolutionary medicine, there's a lot of research now that going into how actually having a relationship with parasites and actually having parasites in your environment can help with our health. And it's called the hygiene hypothesis, and the idea that our sterile environments and us not having access to these parasites and bugs is what's causing a huge increase in autoimmune disorders. And if you look at the global map of parasite infections versus a global map of autoimmune disease, they're practically inverse. And they're actually starting to do some
trials,
yes. So exploratory trials to see if they can cure autoimmune disease by infecting people with heirloom parasites like hookworm.
Or at least alleviate some of the
it
symptoms.
it trains their immune system what an actual pathogen is and gets it stronger.
Gets it to fight that instead of its own body. I mean, the immune system is also amazingly complex, but there's whole classes of antibody molecules that are kind of have evolved specifically to fight multicellular parasites, essentially things like tapeworms and guinea worms and hookworms and all these other kind of multicellular organisms that are quite at home inside the human body. So it makes sense that the fact that we don't have those around so much in the Western world leads the immune system to go haywire and start attacking itself.
And we've been co-evolving with them for millennia, probably. And archaeology is doing a really good job of identifying which ones we have been living with for a long time, so which ones are the heirloom ones, and then those are the ones that the doctors should start to test, because those are the ones that we'd have the best relationship with, right? It's always a wonder how we get on these topics. Like, you start with the Croods, and now we're talking about taking parasites out of our ankles.
Well, does anybody have anything positive to say about this movie?
No.
It's colorful.
I think that I didn't dislike it as much as you guys did. I got a few things that I liked. You were talking about the length of the arms and legs. Is that the crural index? Am I right in thinking that that's the proportion of how long the legs are relative to the arms?
Yeah, that sounds right.
And I guess you're right about that part. They also play that up by having them run on all fours for a little bit before they start running on 2 feet, so that they're definitely going for something like that. Mm-hmm. But I kind of really liked the Neanderthal characters because they looked, apart from the arms that were slightly too long and the legs that were slightly too short, they really did look like Neanderthals because they were sort of big and barrel-chested and they weren't fat, but they were just thick. And they had like these broad faces, and their noses could have been a little bit bigger for Neanderthals, but and they weren't ugly. They were beautiful in a non-traditionally human way, which I really liked, especially since there was a female lead character who was not the Daryl Hannah blonde beautiful human. But it was a Neanderthal that was, Neanderthal beautiful, which I kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I mean, the Eep, the character played by Emma Stone, you're right. She was obviously designed as an image to be attractive, but she's also obviously well muscled, and they don't shy away from showing that, which you'd expect from a kind of Neanderthal character. She reminded me a bit of is it Luisa from Encanto? I don't know if you guys have seen Encanto, but there's a really strong female character in that as well. And apparently there was all sorts of controversy about whether they were going to show her this magically strong character as actually being muscled as well, because that would detract from her femininity, apparently. But in this film as well, it was nice to see a female character that was not ashamed of being muscular and was presented like that.
I wouldn't say I didn't like this movie. I would say I'm just neutral to it. Like, I'll forget it existed by tomorrow.
Teach me your skills, how you could do that. Yeah, I just didn't really like it. Didn't find it very funny. It was kind of the same old story, kind of hashed from different films. I mean, my notes are also a bit of a mess. Well, one thing that I did like was in their kind of journey to the higher mountain to escape the end of the world that they're going through. They talk a bit about some of their kind of mythology, and they talk about how the stars they can see in the sky are the kind of old day suns. Like every time a sun has kind of passed through the sky, it becomes a star. And I thought that was quite a sweet idea. Yeah. I mean, I think almost more thought went into that as a kind of background mythology than any other part of the film. And it was quite nice to see that little bit of, I guess, crude theology in the film itself.
Yeah, that was nice.
I also like the way they didn't paint the Neanderthals in a very positive light, but at least they painted that as cultural and not biologically ingrained, because they self-identified as cavemen at the beginning, but then at the end of the movie, they didn't self-identify as cavemen anymore. So it's not that they were biologically inferior to modern humans. It's that they were so isolated that they didn't have any innovations. So once they interacted with more people, they were able to innovate more. And they had the same capacity for everything that Guy had. It's just that they didn't have the community supporting that innovation that he had, right? Or maybe that's maybe that's too gracious a reading of it.
No, I think that was kind of the almost the main theme of the whole sort of story, was the idea that these guys had a very kind of paranoid, as Kim says, outlook on life, and you should never not be afraid. And then that kind of turns around. They kind of grow and evolve essentially as people to be more open to new things, which I think is it's a fairly nice message to have.
Mm-hmm.
So I was optimistic based on these ideas at the beginning, but then I was disappointed by the end that we started off with this strong female lead who was unconventionally attractive, and then by the end of the movie you realize, she's not really the main character. The main characters are Grug and Guy, and it's the conflict of Grug losing control of his family head position and dealing with the fear of the unknown. And it's all about their growth, and it's not about her growth. And even though there are more female characters than male characters in this movie, it doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
That's so crazy. How did they not have a single conversation?
I don't think that they did. I mean, I
can't think of it either. I don't think they did.
Everybody is talking to either Grug or to Guy. Nobody else really has a conversation amongst themselves.
Or the kind of mother-daughter conversations are about Grug or Guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not great.
No.
Having a film with there's like the mother-in-law, the mother, the daughter, the baby. So it's 4 female characters versus Grug, Guy, and Lunk or Thunk, whatever he's called, versus 3 male characters and not past the Bechdel test.
Yeah, that's bad. They're not even trying.
No. Do we have a good endpoint, Josh?
Probably not. Not for this one.
Oh well. It's terrible and I hate it. There you go.
I think Ross could say, what did you say? It was so good.
Nothing, ever.
Oh, I forget. You said a comment that was really good. That would be a good ending. Oh, I can't remember it.
Did you say it in the recording? I'll just go back and copy and paste it and we'll end on it.
Yeah. Oh, he said something like, I almost laughed. That was it. I almost laughed.
Well, I did almost laugh. But then I managed to stop myself.
If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.